Hey you, where do you think you're going? This isn't your pool. The voice belonged to a woman in her 60s, with gray hair pulled into a tight bun and a face twisted with anger. She stood by a lounge chair, clutching a Gucci bag so tightly her knuckles whitened. A name tag pinned to the bag read, Stella Morris. Jake stopped, his eyebrows slightly raised. He was no stranger to moments like this. His dark brown skin often made him a target for those clinging to outdated prejudices. But here, in his pool, the confrontation felt particularly absurd. "Sorry, I didn't see you," Jake replied calmly, his voice steady, almost gentle. He stepped to the side to pass Stella, but she moved to block his path. "Didn't see me? Are you blind or just brazen?" she snapped, her voice rising, drawing the attention of nearby visitors. Kids by the pool fell silent, and a few adults turned their heads. People like, "You have no right to be here. This is a place for decent folks, not for the likes of you." Jake felt a familiar heat rise in his chest, anger mixed with frustration. But he took a deep breath and reminded himself why he was here. He wasn't going to meet aggression with aggression. His goal was different, to show that even in moments like this, dialogue was possible. "Ms. Morris," he said, reading her name from the tag, "I'm here to swim, just like you. Can we enjoy the day without trouble?" Stella snorted, her eyes blazing with contempt. She stepped closer, her finger jabbing toward Jake, stopping just short of his chest. "Enjoy? Are you serious? You people," she spat, slowing her words for emphasis, "always ruin everything. I pay for this place to relax, not to put up with." She trailed off, but her glare finished the sentence. The atmosphere thickened, like the air before a storm. A teenage girl nearby lowered her eyes, her hands fidgeting with her phone. An older man with a newspaper coughed, but didn't intervene. Whispers rippled through the crowd, but no one dared speak up. Jake noticed the tension building, but kept his composure. He knew he could pull out his owner's ID and end this in seconds. But that felt too easy. He wanted Stella to see her mistake, not through his authority, but through humanity. "Ms. Morris, I understand you're upset," he said, his voice steady but laced with quiet resolve. "But I have a right to be here. Why don't we talk about what's bothering you? I'm willing to listen." Stella let out a cold, mocking laugh. "Talk. You think I'm stupid? I know who you are. You're all the same, showing up where you're not wanted, demanding to be let in." She pulled out her phone, her fingers trembling with rage. "I'm calling security. They'll throw you out like the trash you are." Jake stood, arms crossed, his face impassive. Eyes bore into him, some curious, some hostile, but he held Stella's gaze. He knew security would arrive soon, and that Trevor the guard would recognize him. But Jake wasn't ready to reveal who he was. Not yet. A minute later, Trevor jogged over, a young man with broad shoulders and an awkward expression. Jake had seen him at staff meetings. Trevor was a diligent worker, but clearly unprepared for this. "Ms. Morris, what's the problem?" Trevor asked, trying to sound authoritative, though his voice wavered. Stella pointed at Jake, her voice ringing with indignation. This guy, he doesn't belong here. He's a threat. I want him gone. Check his ID, do something." Trevor glanced at Jake, his eyes widening in recognition. He opened his mouth, but Jake gave a subtle shake of his head, signaling him to stay quiet. "Sir," Trevor said, clearly uncomfortable, "can you show me your ticket or ID?" Jake slowly pulled out his wallet and handed over a standard membership card he'd gotten as a regular visitor. He passed it to Trevor, his eyes never leaving Stella. "Here, everything's in order," he said quietly. Trevor glanced at the card and nodded. It's all good, Ms. Morris. He has a right to be here. Stella looked as if she'd been slapped. Her face flushed crimson, her eyes flashing with fury. This is ridiculous. Are you blind? He doesn't belong here. I won't feel safe with him around. She turned to Jake, her voice rising to a shriek. You think you can just show up and ruin our day? The silence around them grew heavy. Kids stopped splashing in the pool, and adults edged closer to hear what would happen next. Jake felt the moment teetering on a knife's edge. He could reveal who he was now, humiliate Stella in front of everyone. But that wasn't his way. Ms. Morris, he said, his voice softer but still firm, I don't want to ruin your day. I came here to swim, to spend time with people who love this place as much as I do. Can we talk without shouting? I'm ready to hear you out. Stella recoiled as if he'd suggested something repulsive. Hear you out? I'd sooner throw my bag in the pool than talk to the likes of you. She spun to Trevor, her voice shrill. If you can't do your job, I'll call the owner myself. I know people who'll make you regret not listening to me. Trevor looked lost, his eyes darting between Stella and Jake. Jake decided it was time to nudge things forward. Trevor, he said quietly, loud enough for others to hear, why don't you get the manager? Maybe she can help sort this out. Trevor exhaled with relief and nodded, hurrying toward the office. Stella stood, arms crossed, her glare dripping with defiance. Jake waited, watching the people around him. Some looked away, others whispered, and the teenage girl, who'd been watching earlier now, stared at Jake with curiosity. A few minutes later, Trevor returned with the manager, Linda, a middle-aged woman who'd worked at Sunny Hill since its opening. Linda knew Jake, but understood he wanted to remain anonymous. What's going on here? Linda asked, her voice calm but commanding. Stella launched into her tirade. This man is a threat. He has no right to be here, and I demand you remove him. I pay for this place, and I won't tolerate this nonsense. Linda glanced at Jake, her eyes narrowing slightly, then turned back to Stella. Ms. Morris, I see he has a valid ticket. Is there a specific reason you believe he shouldn't be here? Stella faltered, her anger mixing with embarrassment. She couldn't outright say her issue was Jake's skin color, but her earlier words had already betrayed her. He's acting suspicious. I don't feel safe, she blurted, her voice trembling with rage. Linda nodded, her expression neutral. I understand your concern, but without specific violations, I don't see grounds to ask this gentleman to leave. Jake felt the tension ease slightly, but Stella wasn't backing down. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing. This is outrageous. You're all in on it. I won't let this go. I'll call City Hall. I'll write to the papers. You'll regret not listening to me. Jake knew this was just the beginning. Stella wasn't one to give up easily, but neither was he. He wanted her to see him as a person, not a threat. And he wanted everyone watching to think about what they saw and how they reacted. Linda, he said, his voice calm but resolute, I think we could talk with Ms. Morris in your office. No shouting, just a conversation. Maybe we can find common ground. Linda looked at him, surprised, but nodded. If Ms. Morris agrees, I'm fine with that. Stella snorted, her eyes burning with hatred. Common ground? I'd sooner leave this place than sit in a room with him. But I'll go, just to show you all how right I am. She spun on her heel and stormed toward the office, casting furious glances at everyone around. Jake followed, his steps steady but determined. He knew this was only the first round, and ahead lay a real battle, not for power, but for understanding. Linda's office, the manager of Sunny Hill, was small but cozy. Framed photos of the pool's opening, certificates, and children's drawings from local schools adorned the walls. The smell of coffee from a machine in the corner mingled with the faint chlorine scent seeping in from the hallway. Jake sat on a plastic chair across from Linda's desk, his posture relaxed, but his eyes keenly watching Stella. She stood, refusing to sit, her arms crossed and lips pressed into a thin line. Linda closed the door to muffle the noise from the pool and sat at her desk, her face neutral. "Ms. Morris," Linda began, "I want us to calmly sort this out. You said you feel uncomfortable. Can you explain why?" Stella exhaled sharply, her eyes flashing angrily at Jake. "Explain? It's obvious. He doesn't belong here." She jabbed a finger toward Jake, her voice trembling with fury. "I pay for membership to relax in a safe, decent place, not to share a pool with people who..." "Who?" She faltered, but her glare made her meaning clear. Jake felt the familiar heat of anger rise in his chest, but focused on his breathing. He knew Stella wasn't just angry. She was blinded by prejudices she'd likely nurtured for decades. His goal wasn't to humiliate her, but to try to crack that wall, even just a little. "Ms. Morris," he said, his voice low and calm, like he was soothing a frightened animal, "I understand you're uncomfortable. But I'm here as a member, just like you. I'm curious. What about my presence bothers you so much? Can we talk about it?" Stella scoffed, her face twisting into a sneer. "Talk? You think I'm going to waste my time? I know who you are." Her voice rose to a shout as she turned to Linda. "I don't understand why you let people like him ruin this place. I've talked to other members, and they agree with me." Linda sighed, her fingers tapping lightly on the desk. She knew Jake and understood he could end this with a single word, but his silence told her he wanted something else. "Ms. Morris," Linda said, her tone professional, "Sunny Hill has an open-door policy. Anyone with a valid ticket can use the pool. Without specific violations, I don't see grounds for your demands." Stella slammed her fist on the desk, making a cup of pencils rattle. "Violations? His presence is the violation. I don't feel safe. Don't you read the news? You know what happens when people like him show up in our neighborhoods." The silence in the room grew heavy, like the air before a storm. Jake noticed Linda's lips tighten as she struggled to stay calm. He knew Stella wasn't just voicing her opinion. She was airing fears and biases that still festered in many, especially among older generations. But he also knew that shouting and accusations would only make things worse. "Ms. Morris," he said, his voice softer but with a clear edge of confidence, "I don't want you to feel unsafe. I'm a father of 2. I live 15 minutes from here. I pay taxes like you do. I come here to swim and relax. Can you tell me what exactly scares you? I really want to understand." Stella blinked, clearly not expecting this tone. Her anger wavered for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "Don't you dare talk to me about your kids," she snapped. "I know what kind of people you are. I've seen how everything changes, my neighborhood, my stores, my parks. You come in and take what's ours." "Linda up." Linda raised her hand, her voice firm. "Ms. Morris, I'm going to ask you to calm down. These kinds of accusations are unacceptable. If you can't have a conversation without insults, we'll have to end this meeting." Stella spun toward Linda, her eyes blazing. "And you're defending him? I've been a member of this club since day one. I have a right to demand respect." Jake felt the moment nearing a boiling point. He knew Stella wasn't listening. She was too consumed by her anger and fear. But he also noticed Linda clenching her fists under the desk, barely containing her own outrage. He decided to try one more time. "Ms. Morris," he said, his voice almost a whisper but each word clear, "I don't want to take your place. I want us all to share it. Do you remember when this pool opened? How everyone was excited to have a place where kids could play and adults could relax. I was there at the opening. Were you?" Stella froze. Her eyes narrowed, but a flicker of doubt crossed them. She had been at the opening of Sunny Hill 5 years ago. She remembered the music, the balloons, the laughter of children. But she didn't remember Jake, or rather, she didn't connect him to that day. "So what?" she muttered, her voice losing some of its edge. "That doesn't mean you have a right to be here." Jake nodded, as if agreeing with her. "Maybe not, but I'm here, and I don't want conflict. Can we try to find a way forward? I'm willing to hear what's bothering you, and maybe we can figure out how everyone can feel comfortable." Stella opened her mouth to respond, but the office door suddenly swung open. Trevor burst in, his face anxious. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, "but there's a group of people gathering by the pool. They're talking about what happened. Some are siding with Ms. Morris, but others are demanding answers. They want to know why we're allowing scenes like this." Linda sighed, her shoulders slumping. "Great," she muttered. "Just what we need." Jake felt his heart tighten. He knew the situation was spiraling. Stella, sensing an opportunity, straightened, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "See, I'm not the only one who thinks this way. People want their pool to stay safe." She turned to Linda. "If you don't kick him out right now, I'll make sure the whole city hears about this." Linda looked at Jake, her eyes pleading for guidance. She knew he could reveal his identity and end this, but she sensed he wanted something else. Jake stood slowly, his movements calm but resolute. "Linda," he said, "let me talk to the people. Not as the owner, but as a visitor. Maybe I can calm them down." Linda blinked, clearly surprised. "Are you sure? This could get messy." Jake smiled, not triumphantly, but with quiet confidence. "I'm used to messy. Let's try." Stella snorted, but a flicker of uncertainty crossed her eyes. She couldn't understand why this man, whom she saw as a threat, was so calm. And that uncertainty, however small, was the first crack in her armor. They left the office and headed to the main pool, where a small crowd had gathered, men and women, young and old, with varying expressions. Some looked angry, others curious, and some just waited to see what would happen. Jake felt their eyes on him, but his steps remained steady. He knew this was a moment of truth, not just for Stella, but for everyone watching. "Good afternoon," he said, his voice loud but warm, like he was addressing friends. "I understand some of you are upset about what happened. I want to talk, not to argue, but to understand how we can make this place better for everyone." The crowd stirred, some muttering under their breath. Stella stood behind, arms crossed, watching. Jake felt his heart beat faster, but his face remained calm. He knew this was just the beginning, and that every step, every word, could build a bridge or a wall. The sun hung high above the Sunny Hill pool, reflecting off the calm water that rippled faintly in the breeze. The chatter of children returning to their games mingled with the murmurs of the crowd gathered near the main entrance. About 20 people, young parents with strollers, elderly visitors from lounge chairs, formed a loose semicircle, their faces a mix of curiosity, indignation, and uncertainty. Jake Wilson stood before them, his posture open, hands relaxed at his sides. Beneath his calm exterior, tension simmered. He knew every word he spoke could either defuse the situation or pour fuel on the fire. Stella Morris stood to the side, arms crossed, her eyes locked on Jake. Her anger hadn't faded, but a hint of wariness had crept in. She was waiting for him to slip, to give her a reason to double down on her righteousness. Linda, the manager, stood near Trevor, the security guard, her face neutral, but her fingers nervously clutching her badge. The crowd waited, the air humming with tension. "I understand many of you heard what happened," Jake began, his voice loud but warm, like he was speaking to neighbors at a barbecue. "And I know some of you might feel uneasy. I want to talk about this, not to point fingers, but so we can understand each other." A middle-aged man in a baseball cap, with a tanned face and a tattoo on his arm, stepped forward. His tone was sharp, but not hostile. "Look, I don't know what went down, but I brought my kids here. If there's a problem, I want to know it's safe for them." Jake nodded, meeting the man's eyes. "I hear you. I'm a father myself, and my kids' safety means everything to me. I'm here to swim, to relax like you. But it seems my presence has concerned some people." He paused, his gaze gently sweeping the crowd. "I'd like to know why." Stella couldn't hold back. She stepped forward, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "Why? Because you don't belong here." Her words were sharp, dripping with venom. "We pay for this pool to be ours, for people who live here, who respect our rules. And you're just an outsider who thinks he can do whatever he wants." The crowd stirred. Some nodded in agreement, but others looked uneasy. A young woman with a baby in her arms frowned, her lips tightening. The teenager who'd watched the earlier scene pulled out his phone and started recording, his eyes alight with interest. Jake raised a hand, gesturing for quiet. His face remained calm, but a steel glint flashed in his eyes. "Ms. Morris, I hear you. You say I'm an outsider. But I live in this town like you. I pay taxes like you. My kids go to the local school. I don't understand why my being here feels like a threat to you. Can you explain?" Stella opened her mouth, but hesitated. Her anger was her fuel, but Jake's calm question threw her off. She glanced at the crowd, seeking support, and saw some approving looks, but also doubt on other faces. "You know why?" she finally shouted, her voice shaking with rage. "Don't play dumb. You people!" She paused, her eyes narrowing. "You always bring trouble. I read the news. I know what's happening in this city." An elderly woman in a bright swimsuit, standing near the edge of the crowd, coughed loudly. "Stella, calm down," she said, her voice raspy but firm. "You're making a mountain out of a molehill. He just wants to swim." Stella spun toward her, her eyes flashing. "Marge, don't you see? If we let people like him in, this place will turn into downtown dirt, noise, danger. I didn't pay thousands for a membership to deal with that." Jake felt the crowd's tension rise. He knew Stella wasn't alone in her thinking. Her words resonated with those who feared change, who clung to an old notion of us versus them. But he also saw not everyone agreed. The young woman with the baby stepped forward, her voice soft but clear. "Excuse me, but I don't get it," she said, her eyes on Stella. He showed his ticket. "He's being polite. Why are you yelling at him? Because of how he looks." Stella blinked, caught off guard. The crowd whispered, and Jake noticed a few people look away, as if embarrassed. He seized the moment. "Thank you," he said, nodding to the young woman. "I think that's what we all want to understand. I don't want anyone to feel unsafe or uncomfortable. But I also want us to share this place, all of us. Maybe someone else wants to share what they think." I'm listening. The man in the baseball cap sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Look, I don't want trouble, but I've heard there've been incidents here. Thefts, fights. I just want my kids safe. Jake nodded, his gaze open. I understand, and I agree. Safety comes first. But I haven't heard of any thefts or fights here at Sunny Hill. Maybe Linda can tell us what the facility does to keep everyone safe. Linda, who'd been silent, perked up. She stepped forward, her voice confident. We have security cameras, guards on every floor, and we screen all visitors. In 5 years, we've had no serious incidents. We do everything to keep this place safe for everyone. The man in the baseball cap nodded, but Stella wasn't done. Cameras? Guards? That's useless if you let just anyone in. She turned to the crowd, her voice shrill. Don't you see? This is our pool, our place. If we don't protect it, we'll lose everything. Jake felt the moment teetering on the edge. He knew Stella was trying to stoke fear, and her words could push the crowd toward chaos. But he also saw not everyone was swayed. The teenager, still holding his phone, lowered it and stepped forward. Sorry, but this feels wrong, he said, his voice shaky but resolute. He didn't do anything. You're just yelling at him because he's, well, black. That's not fair. The crowd fell silent. The word Stella had avoided was finally spoken. Stella flushed, her eyes blazing at the teenager. How dare you, she shouted. I'm not a racist. I just want this place to stay decent. But her words were drowned in the crowd's murmurs. The young woman with the baby shook her head. Marge, the elderly woman, sighed loudly. Even the man in the baseball cap looked uneasy, as if realizing things had gone too far. Jake raised a hand, his voice calm but cutting through the noise. I don't want us to fight. I want us to talk. Ms. Morris, I understand you're scared of change. A lot of people are. But this place, he gestured toward the pool, was built for everyone. For your kids, for mine, for all of us. Can we try to make it better together? Stella opened her mouth, but found no words. Her anger, once unyielding, began to crack under the weight of the crowd's gazes. She stepped back, her hands falling to her sides. Jake turned to the crowd, his eyes sincere. I'm not asking you to change your mind in a minute, but I'm asking for a chance. Give me a chance. Give this place a chance. If I'm wrong, tell me. I'm listening. The crowd was quiet, but the tension began to ease. The man in the baseball cap nodded, as if accepting Jake's words. The young woman with the baby gave a small smile. The teenager raised his phone, but didn't record, he just listened. Linda stepped forward, her voice quiet but firm. I think we're done for now. If anyone has questions or complaints, come to my office. Let's get back to enjoying the day. The crowd began to disperse, some whispering, others silent. Stella stood rooted, her face a mix of anger and confusion. She glanced at Jake, as if wanting to say something, but turned and walked to her lounge chair, her steps sharp. Jake exhaled, feeling the tension drain from his body. Linda approached, her voice low. You sure you don't want to tell them who you are? It could have ended this. Jake shook his head, a faint smile on his lips. Not yet. I want them to see me as a person first, not the owner. Linda nodded, her eyes shining with respect. You're taking a risk, Jake, but maybe it's worth it. He looked at the pool, where kids laughed again, the water sparkling in the sun. The crowd had scattered, but he knew the conversation wasn't over. Stella might have backed off, but her anger was a symptom of a bigger issue, and Jake was ready to work on it, step by step, word by word. He grabbed his towel and headed to the pool, his steps light. This wasn't the end, just the start. And in that start, there was hope, small but alive. The sun dipped low over the horizon, painting the sky above Sunny Hill in shades of orange and pink. The pool shimmered in the soft light, and the hum of visitors settled into a gentle murmur, kids exhausted from play, adults chatting lazily on lounge chairs. The scent of chlorine mingled with the aroma of grilled burgers from the nearby cafe, and a faint breeze carried the twang of a distant radio playing country music. Jake Wilson sat by the pool's edge, his feet dangling in the cool water. He'd just finished swimming, and water droplets still glistened on his shoulders. But his mind wasn't on the water or the heat. It was on what had happened today and what lay ahead. After the crowd dispersed, the tension at Sunny Hill eased but didn't vanish. Jake felt eyes on him, some curious, some wary, but most indifferent, as if people had returned to their routines, leaving the conflict behind. Stella Morris sat on her lounge chair at the far end of the pool, her posture rigid, her eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses. She hadn't approached Jake since their confrontation, but he noticed her glancing his way occasionally, as if trying to figure him out. Linda, the manager, approached, holding a tablet with the shift schedule. Her face was tired, but her eyes held quiet respect. "You really made an impression today," she said softly, sitting on the pool's edge beside him. "I've seen plenty of arguments over the years, but I've never seen someone take a hit that calmly." Jake smiled, his gaze fixed on the water. "It's not about taking hits, Linda. It's about showing there's another way. I don't want people like Stella to see me as an enemy. I want them to see a person." Linda sighed, her fingers tapping lightly on the tablet. "That's noble, but it's tough. She won't change her mind in a day. And it's not just her. There are others who think like her. They just don't shout it." Jake nodded, his expression growing serious. "I know, but if I don't start, who will? This place," he gestured to the pool, the cafe, the playground, "I didn't build it just for profit. I wanted it to be a bridge, and bridges take time." Linda looked at him, a small smile tugging at her lips. "You sound like a preacher." Jake laughed, his chuckle low and genuine. "Maybe a little, but I believe even small steps matter." Their conversation was interrupted by a soft voice. Jake turned and saw the teenager who'd filmed the earlier conflict. The boy, about 16, with curly hair and freckles, stood nearby, clutching a towel. His name was Aiden. Jake had overheard his mother calling him earlier. Mister," Aiden began, his voice shaky with awkwardness. "Can I talk to you?" Jake nodded, gesturing for him to sit. "Sure. What's on your mind?" Aiden sat on the edge, his legs swinging nervously. I wanted to say the way you talked today. It was cool. I mean, he nodded toward Stella. She was, you know, but you didn't yell back. I don't think I could have done that." Jake smiled, his eyes warm. "Thanks, Aiden. But trust me, it wasn't easy. Sometimes you want to yell, but I've learned yelling rarely changes anything." Aiden nodded, his fingers tightening on the towel. "My grandma. She sometimes talks like that lady. Not as loud, but, I never know what to say to her. But after today, I'm thinking, maybe I'll try talking like you did." Jake felt warmth spread through his chest. It wasn't a solution, not a victory, but it was a step, small but real. "That's a great idea," he said. "Just listen to her, ask questions. Sometimes people change when they feel heard." Aiden nodded, his face thoughtful. He stood, mumbling thanks, and ran to his mom, who was waving from the other end of the pool. Linda glanced at Jake, her eyebrows slightly raised. "See? You're already making a difference." Jake shrugged, but his smile widened. "Maybe a little." As Linda left to check the schedule, Jake noticed movement from Stella's direction. She stood from her lounge chair, slowly gathered her things, and headed toward the exit. But instead of passing by, she stopped a few feet away. Her sunglasses were pushed down to the tip of her nose, and for the first time that day, Jake saw her eyes not angry, but tired, filled with doubt. "I haven't changed my mind," she said, her voice low but sharp. "But I don't want more fights. I just want peace." Jake nodded, his gaze open. "Me too, Ms. Morris, and I hope we can both find it here." Stella pursed her lips, as if wanting to say more, but turned and walked away. Her steps were slow, and Jake noticed her glance back before disappearing through the doors. It wasn't a win, no apologies or sudden revelations. But it was a moment, a tiny crack in her armor that might, one day, grow wider. Jake stood, his towel draped over his shoulder. He looked at the pool, where Aiden laughed, diving in with friends. The young woman with the baby rocked her child, humming softly. The man in the baseball cap sat with his wife, their hands intertwined. Life at Sunny Hill went on, and though today had left its mark, it hadn't broken the place. Trevor, the security guard, approached, his face sheepish. "Boss, I didn't know what to do today. Sorry if I messed anything up." Jake clapped a hand on his shoulder, his smile genuine. "You did fine, Trevor. This isn't your fight. Or mine. It's ours, all of us." Trevor nodded, his shoulders relaxing. Jake said goodbye and headed to his pickup in the lot. As he climbed in, he cast a final glance at Sunny Hill. The sign by the entrance, "A place for everyone," gleamed in the fading sunlight. He knew he'd be back tomorrow, and the day after, and every day it took. Not as the owner, but as a man who believed even the smallest step could change the world. As he started the engine, the radio softly played an old Frank Sinatra tune, "My Way." Jake smiled, his fingers tapping lightly on the wheel. The road ahead was long, but he was ready. And deep down, he felt today wasn't an end, but the start of something bigger.